All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Asia's PEVC 2021 Summit with Deal Street Asia. My name is Sarah Chen, and I'm so excited to be joining Deal Street Asia again. Sixth year in the running, the place to be for everything that's private equity and venture capital. And of course, before we begin this important discussion, I did want to give a special shout out to Deal Street Asia, led by Joji, who over the past couple of years, ever since they've had the summit, have put women at the helm, women in leadership, women who are writing the checks and women who are receiving the checks as the priority for this platform that has made all the difference in the voices that we hear in our industry. And I myself, as I've evolved my career over the last couple of years, together with Deal Street Asia, from corporate venture capital to now focusing on the global venture funding gap, I'm so excited that we are seeing new faces. But of course, as the saying goes, there's so much more to go and we have our work cut out for us. So to get started here, I did want to lay a little bit of the land with a bit of the landscape. Data on funding for women-led enterprises reveals a rather discouraging story, with deals involving women founders or co-founders accounting for only 17.1% of the total PE and VC deals that are tracked. And of course, as Deal Street Asia does it, looking deep into the details, if we actually take out Grab, the big deal, the mega deal in our region, that number drops to 4.7%, which means that the majority, 95% of all venture capital funding in our region goes to all male teams. Why is this a reality? How did we get here, and how can we change the landscape? Because as I will hear it from our panelists, it does matter. So to dive a little bit deeper into this, I have a truly distinguished panel with me. I have from Sequoia Capital Managing Director, and I hear he's celebrating his 15th year in business in the firm, and we're so excited to bring his view into this issue. GV Ravishankar, welcome, GV. How are you?
Very well, Sarah. Thank you for having me here.
Good to have you. And of course, we have President of LetsVenture, Sunitha Ramaswamy. Sunitha, how are you?
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. Thanks, DealStreet Asia as well.
Good to see you. And of course, finally, we have Nacitta, or as I hear it, the popular way to call her is Cheetah, Kanyandara, Partner and Chief Growth Officer from Sayurbox, who will be giving us a little bit more of the startup and founder view. And how are you, Cheetah?
Great, Sarah. Thanks for having me as well, and DealStreet Asia as well.
Good, fantastic. Well, good to have you all. Now let's really get deep into the heart of it. The goal of the session is really for newcomers, people who have been looking at this industry, to understand a little bit of the issue that we're grappling with here, that the abysmal funding gap that is the case for women founders. And want to start with the lay of the land as I did, but getting into the heart of the issue of why it matters. So let's start with GV, maybe from your view, after evolving over the 15 years, what have you seen? Why does this matter, and why does this matter to Sequoia at this time?
Thank you, Sarah. This is, obviously a very important conversation. I'm glad, we have a dedicated panel to discuss this. And look, going back, you stated the facts as they are. 5% of funding going to women founders. We did this analysis for ourselves and looked at, where Sequoia stands, and about 19 to 20% of our investments are going into companies that are started by women founders, which we thought was abysmally low. Now, the number that you're telling me is even more discouraging and scary, because broadly in the world, if there are roughly 50% men and 50% women, the fact that we have such a big diversity in or a disparity in how much companies are getting funded is actually quite disheartening, frankly. Diversity is good for every economy, right? Whether, because from our perspective, you want people with variety of perspectives to be, starting businesses, building. I want to just, give you this one viral video I watched. Many of you would have watched this, this 7-year-old child asking, why are things only man-made and why are things not women-made, right? And, it's just something that, I watched repeatedly. It was just hit the point so hard. And it's coming from a 7-year-old, was asking this very innocuous question, saying, Mama, why is everything called man-made? Why is it not women-made? Why can't women build? Of course, women should be building. We need that. We need a different perspective in this world. It shouldn't be all be done by men, built for men in the mindset that's only one side of the brain working in a certain way. You want people with diversity of perspectives contributing to this economy. And some of our founders like Kunal Shah talks a lot about, women participation in labor and how that number has been reducing, particularly in India. These are all big issues that need fixing. Some of it, maybe is because how we evolved as a society in some of these economies. There has been a history, but there's no excuse in current day and time, especially in a post-COVID environment where people can work from anywhere, remotely, that we should not really unleash the women power out there. And, we need that diversity. We need their contributions. If, as India as an economy, for example, has to really grow faster, we can't do with only small percentage of women working in the economy. So we need their contributions. This is super important for the venture industry. Is very important. Sorry,
and GV, if I may as well, I want to dive a little bit deeper into sort of the concrete numbers here. I know Sequoia has looked at their own portfolio. Have you seen a particular trend with female founders and gender diverse teams? Just like how, First Round Capital did an analysis, and that's, a big part of what drives us in terms of pushing for diversity as well.
Right. So this is an output metric, right? We are starting to kind of start measuring input metrics, seeing how many new women founders are we meeting. We all have committed time on a monthly basis that we would want to meet more women founders. We launched a Spark program. I'm happy to talk more about it over a period of time, where we are basically saying we will fund 15 women founders every year, give them a 100K grant, and enable them. And that comes from some of the work we did. We actually surveyed 200 women founders and asked them what is the issue, what are the difficulties they are facing. And a large proportion of them said access to capital, access to networks. And basically the word access kept coming back again and again and again, which meant like they felt somewhat secluded. They didn't feel like they were part of the same ecosystem. They just didn't seem to have the right networks and access. And we said, look, we have been doing this, like you said, this is the 16th year in India and Southeast Asia overall as a region. And we have the networks, we have the access. Why don't we open it up for them? And we put together this program that, we call Spark. But essentially, hopefully, it ignites a long-term kind of model of showing how we can bring more women entrepreneurs to the mainstream. So yeah, in short, it is improving, but there's a lot more that has to be done.
Yeah, and I love that. I think it is, about ensuring the top of the funnel, right? That's really what you're addressing with Spark, making sure the top of the funnel is robust and that they are getting to you. Because often, a popular saying that I like to share an anecdote of my own experiences where I speak to top VC firms every time, and they'll say, Sarah, we don't discriminate. Whenever a woman gets to my door, I evaluate her absolutely equally. But that, as we all know around the table, is the wrong question to ask. It is, what does it take for a woman to get to and through your door? And with that, I want to turn to Sunitha. I know, Sunitha, you're doing a lot of important work with LetsVenture and have quite a huge portfolio as I see it over the years. Talk to us a little bit more about why this matters for you, what you're seeing, and how are you approaching it?
Yeah, very interestingly, actually, LetsVenture was founded by a woman herself, right? So Shanti Mohan is the founder. So for us, I think it was also more from a DNA perspective. And I don't think we consciously, very interestingly, couldn't consciously look at also hiring women, but 50% or 60% of the team is also women, right? So more from that aspect, what we also started seeing was, like GV mentioned, the number of people who actually even approached for funding. That was one problem. The second problem, which we actually saw, was more from the investor side as well. So we saw very few women investors. We have 8,000 plus angel investors, out of which we had 10 women investors. That's it, right? And we felt that was a really large problem. Can we actually look at the funder side as well, which can then actually facilitate the outcome from a founder side as well, right? So if I have more women investors, am I able to connect better to women founders? Which we have seen actually more often than not happening in the majority of cases, right? So can we actually solve it from that aspect as well, right? So I think it was a combination of both looking at angel investors as well as, like GV mentioned, abysmally small women founders to come into picture there. And I think one key other point, right, which he spoke of access to network, I think that becomes very important. We have not seen community of women founders, which we do think is very, very important, right? Because you do see it's majority male dominated across the spectrum, which also makes you a lot more comfortable, right? In terms of asking for support, asking for, hey, you know what, can you connect me to GV or can you connect me to Sarah is a lot more easier. The women founders actually do not have that network and the community. I think that is also going to be one of the most important parts in terms of being able to build on the women founder network itself.
Yeah, and have you seen particularly, I mean, what I'm getting at into why this matters is sort of the outperformance, from a global landscape, we've seen it, right? We've seen 63%. That was a data point from First Round Capital. We're seeing women do a lot better with the cash management. And that's something that actually was a highlight during COVID-19, because the good news, bad news is they've been underfunded, but therefore they're a lot more careful with cash management. Runways are a lot better managed. And they're right sizing, perhaps, even sizing a little bit more conservatively from day one. What are you seeing with your portfolio? Have you seen any particular trends that you can share with us?
Actually, interestingly, from a portfolio perspective, we have not seen too much of a deviation in terms of how they've actually performed, because most of them have been male and female combination of founders. But what you mentioned in terms of women being cash flow conscious, I think it's also somewhere being risk averse, right? I do see that as something which is, which is where a lot of women founders actually look at, hey, what should I raise more? Today, if you just look at even just seed funding is $1 million, $1.5 million, but the women founders actually look at a much smaller quantum, right? Hey, it shouldn't matter whether you're a male or a female. Your company requires this quantum. And can you look at those kind of numbers? I think that also is very important. We have seen more risk-averse personalities from women, because of which you will also see the numbers actually much lower from a women founding aspect too.
Yeah, and that's an interesting trend that we do want to talk about that. But before that, I do want to turn to the founder's perspective. And Cheetah, you are front and center in being, held responsible for growth for Sayurbox. Talk to us a little bit about this. How have you felt, particularly, being front and center in trying to expand the business as, I guess, a women-led enterprise?
I find the discussions are interesting. There are two words that I found I can really relate to. I think one is access, and then the second is community. And I think both of that leads to this domino effect of not having females in certain positions, and therefore not having more females in other positions. So I think role modeling is such an important thing in this discussion, because for example, if like Sunitha was saying, if there's not enough investors, then there's not enough people who would want to feel comfortable to go up and say, hey, I need funding. With Sayurbox, interestingly, half of our C-level management team are women, and they're managing not just marketing or HR, but even operations. We even got a comment one day when we were pitching to an investor asking us, can you prove to me that you're actually on the ground in the operating room, because I can't believe that you're in the warehouse. So things like that, I think, are quite interesting to highlight. But I think going back to your question around how it has impacted how we run the business. So there's a lot of us in the management team, and therefore there becomes a lot of us in the, I guess, second level management team, right? The heads of businesses. So for example, 2/3 of my heads of businesses are female, which I think is not very representative of other companies, even in the same space as us, e-grocery. So I think that's a clear example of how role modeling works in this situation. And I think that, because we are also serving females generally, right, as a customer, I would argue that we are able to, bring about insights about the customers that I think, our male counterparts might not be able to, or will take longer to. And I think in this situation where COVID hit and there's a lot of uncertainties and around how we manage the team and how we respond to our customers' needs, and we grew quite a lot in the past year and a half. It caused a lot of problems, and managing those uncertainties, I think it requires someone who's or people who are much more risk averse and being able to organize themselves well. I do think in this case it led us to a good outcome. But and happy to discuss that further, and would love your thoughts in other industries as well.
Yeah, no, and I absolutely love that, talking about why this matters, right? The other element of it is that especially in the consumer facing business, 2/3 of consumer purchases are made by women. And the fact that you're in this business where your consumers, are changing, evolving demands, and the purchases and the control of the wallet is in the hands of the women. I think that makes a lot of sense and is truly the value of the she economy as we speak to, right? So women as consumers, women as decision makers, especially in COVID, as we know, the fact that if she's not taking care of the children, of course, men playing a role as well, but she's predominantly making the decisions on the health decisions for the parents as well, aging parents, so on and so forth, which is a huge economy. So thanks for sharing that. And really, I get shocked, every day when I shouldn't be shocked by now by the stories and the comments that investors give to women teams because it's just an anomaly. But I think this is still where we are. And talking about that, coming back to you, GV, I'm sure you've heard of this as well, where investors biases show their ugly heads. And I know you talk about how COVID is an opportunity for us to build forward, not just build back better, but also to avoid reverting to, patterns of the past. Talk to us a little bit about how you're viewing, the role of the investor. What can we do as VCs, as decision makers, especially when we know we're in a male-dominated industry? How do we be more responsible, or how do we be an ally?
Sarah, great question. And look, all of us, including myself, carry biases which we have to work hard to change. First, it's just one, being aware that we have them, right? And then, but that's not sufficient, because many times, even if you know there's a bias, that doesn't cancel the bias. You got to actually do something about it. So you got to take that extra bit, So for example, when you meet a woman founder, and you got to make sure they're feeling comfortable about asking the questions. Many times we've heard things like, hey, people are a little bit reticent to ask, or sometimes afraid. And so you got to make them feel comfortable that we are there to help them, and we'll do the best we can. So for example, one of the things we do just on the access point, Sarah, is we've actually instituted this thing called Coffee Chats with Sequoia, and where many of our senior partners are available, and we schedule with founders that are not our, they're not investee companies, but just generally women founders who can reach out for an hour and just have a conversation, no agenda. It's not a pitch. They just come and talk to us about their business, say, hey, here are the issues. What would be your advice? How can we help, etc. And, many of them turn out to be like, hey, I'm looking to see how to raise capital, and we can talk about it and help them. But there are also, questions on how do I hire? How do I find the right co-founder? What should I do to, improve my network? How do I prepare for pitching for VCs? What's the right time? So lots and lots of questions. And you once you make these things available, once you tell people there is access, right? And then, you see that just the numbers, there are lots and lots of women out there who want to be founders. Just on Spark, and we've not yet announced the numbers, etc. We just had an overwhelming response when we said, look, we would do this grant program, provide 100K for 15 companies. Just, we're feeling bad that we only have a small percentage we can support, but there's just so many applications. But the good news is, look, this is kind of starting to itself, hopefully will, make this a community initiative, and both access and community can be solved. We have a lot of work we do for portfolio, which we can make available for women founders, and provide them the knowledge and the network and access. So we're working on those things. But going back to your question on biases, look, it is real. And first thing, how do we make a change? One, we have to start with ourselves. We should have enough representation of women in the partnership and in the overall company and so on. Again, working very hard on it. There are things that take a little bit longer than we like. In fact, we've said, hey, the next new hires, the associates we have to be women. Now, go figure out how you do it. But that's the mandate we've given, both internally and to people that help us recruit and so on. So that's something that that is a change that needs to be made, because we realize that when we have enough women in the room, automatically the conversation changes. Automatically the way perspectives change, and they're willing to call us out if we are kind of using the wrong terminology or making assumptions and so on. So this is what we need. We have to just make sure there are enough people who feel comfortable calling us out and saying, look, this is a bias, we have to fight it, right? So we have enough. Yeah, sorry.
And GV, I did want to, pull out so many important threads there, right? Number one was that there's not a dearth of great women founders. A lot of times, I mean, you and I have heard this, right? In so many rooms where they're like, but there are just not enough women. There are no women. And that pipeline issue, I'm glad that Sequoia is coming front and center and saying, hey, this pipeline issue is not an issue. We need to go where the women are because they're great talent. As the saying goes, right? Talent is universal, but opportunity is not. The second thing that you're pulling out, the fact that you need to hire women and that this is a serious mandate from the top, that the next few rounds of associates, but also I did want to make sure that we are thinking in the lines that Cheetah has pulled out, which is they're not just in marketing, in non-decision check writing positions, but they are going to eventually get to the places of actually being those decision makers and check writers, not just in marketing, HR, which are important. But it makes a difference to yeah.
Absolutely, they have to be in decision making. So our investment team mandate is we have to be, hiring many more women and just helping them be successful. And again, look, we are very committed to it. We want to do whatever it takes. And so, at Sequoia, thankfully, we are at a position where, we have the resources, we'll go all at it. So yeah, very, very confident that over, the next several years, we'll see a lot more women in the investing and decision-making roles at the firm.
Thank you. Thanks for that. And Sunitha, I do want to turn to you now, as we're talking about pattern matching and biases, right? Pattern matching is something that is so common in our industry in investment, right? That's how we view, okay, this is the trend for success and things like that. And I almost think, and I'm projecting a little bit here, so please, disagree if you will, but in Asia, I feel like we almost have an opportunity because a lot of industries, a lot of things are nascent, and therefore we have an opportunity to build our new patterns. I look at the venture capital funds in Asia, a lot of them, years ago were first-time funds, so did not have that track record requirements, things like that. How are you viewing it from LetsVenture and how are you viewing what will be successful and how does this play out in trying to be inclusive?
So from a founder perspective, again, I think the lens for success doesn't change, right? Because be it a male, be it a female, it is not going to change, right? But the point is in terms of, do they have the same vision and the hunger, right? End of day, especially in early stage investment, it is all about the team and the founders, right? As long as you're seeing that, I think you'll be able to support them, even if they feel apprehensive in the beginning in terms of being able to go out there, to be able to support them in terms of actually being successful. I think that becomes important. So from a lens perspective, actually immaterial. And I think one of the other important points, like, you were mentioning, it's not necessary that women founders are also in more women-focused startups, right? Because we're seeing a lot of women who are coming in deep tech startups, right? Where it has been predominantly male-dominated again. And I think it's important to make sure that you're not biasing in terms of saying, hey, okay, it's a makeup startup or is it a femtech startup? Then, hey, I'm going to give this advantage to the woman. But it's immaterial. Hey, if they have the capacity and the hunger to be able to build a business, you give them the equal opportunity and support them where else is needed to be actually get to the next level. I think that's where it comes down to. So we actually don't coin out specifically to say, hey, what, it is a women founder. Do I need to do extra? No, but women founder hungry, let's go at it to be able to support them. I think that's the way we would want to look at it.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And it is my not so secret dream that this panel is mainstream, right? Because it's just overall investment, as GV said, how can you exclude 50% of the population from innovating, right? We wouldn't be where we are. I mean, Dr. Kathleen Carrico was the brain behind the vaccine, the mRNA vaccine that we look to as a way forward. So how could we exclude innovation like that benefits all of us, not just women? And to that, I want to turn to Cheetah to make sure that you're able to add in also, what are you seeing, from your counterparts' perspective, from the founders' perspective, are the conversation's getting a little bit more mainstream in terms of the fact that, we need to ensure as we're growing our businesses that we are diverse because it's just good for business. Is there a shift you feel in the conversation, in the talent pool, everything that you're seeing?
Yeah, I guess it's interesting. So even when I'm trying to build my team, right, for product and for growth, it initially didn't occur to me, okay, I need to focus on females because I thought, okay, they'll just come, right? For sure, there are great product managers who are females, but 6 months in, a year in, I found out I don't have any female PMs at all. So that to me was like, I guess, a shocking revelation, knowing that going in, that was something that I wanted to make sure was there. So then I guess even when you're in a company that's female-led, majority of management team is female, it's still an issue, right? And I think you can't just leave it to fate or luck that they do join us, right? So we do try our best to in conversations on hiring and promotions have that lens, and like it or not, we still have to do that consciously, because I guess it's not something people consider top of their mind, right? So I guess we are progressing. I would say we're not quite there yet, and I'm not sure if any other companies are there entirely yet either, but we've seen progress.
So Chita, I think that's a very good point. And, I want to make this panel as tactical as possible, right? Rather than talking about concepts. Yeah, we all know this is a good thing to do, but how do we approach it? So for you, as you're growing your team and you're saying that we have to be conscientious and intentional about it, what does this take? Are you reviewing job descriptions? Are you going to, like what Ravi is doing with his portfolio company, sort of top of the funnel, to build product managers and so on and so forth, to build talent? What does it take here?
Yeah, so I think when I looked at it on why this happened, I guess I think 95% of the applications were men, and I know that's a function of, I don't know, product management in Indonesia being relatively a new, I guess, practice. So there's not a lot of people there to begin with, and maybe so it just happens to be men, right? But then I guess the conclusion I came to was like, okay, I can't rely on that, right? So I ended up reaching out to a lot of the female PMs that I knew from before, from my experience with Grab. And just do that occasionally. Like every week I would spend a couple of hours just reaching out to people on LinkedIn. And funnily enough, a few of the other, I guess, chief product officers in other startups that I know also have that question. They ask me, hey, do you know any good female PMs? So I think the issue is really just people who want to hire can't seem to find them and don't know where to look. And maybe the product managers who are looking for opportunities don't feel comfortable reaching out just yet, so I feel like it has to be initiated by the hiring managers and proactively.
Yeah, and I love that tip. I think referral networks, right? Reaching out to people that, it starts with that. It's almost like a viral effect, right? Someone tells someone and someone tells someone, and that's how we get to it. But this is not surprising. Again, HP did a study on looking at job descriptions, right? Women feel that they need to meet 99% of the criteria before they put their hand up. And this is in normal corporate positions that have been in existence for far longer, versus product management, as you say, in Indonesia, where, you need to be a little bit more creative in saying that, okay, because I've done this role, this could fit into a product manager role, and I can be creative about it. Whereas for men, unfortunately, or fortunately for them, I meet 65%, 70% of the criteria, and I raise my hand because I think I can figure it out. And it's about changing that. And Ravi, GV, I hear that you're about to say something. Did you want to add something to that?
So I was going to say, we are learning from our portfolio, to be honest. I point to ask them what they're doing. Freshworks actually put out an interesting blog. This is a company that went public last week, about what they did. They took a mandate that 1/3 to start with, and it's not the number that they want to be. By a certain time period, they want to be 1/3 women, and they hit that metric. 32% they got to in 12 months. And the set of things they had to do, including things like making sure they give that a little bit of extra support for women to not drop out of workforce, right? This is about managing the young kids, counseling, sometimes even helping them with domestic abuse situations that they may be in. So they went all out and did that. And they also actually specifically focused on a return to work type of program to bring women back into the labor force, because again, people get married, move on, and then they're not at work, but they've held good jobs and they need to be back in the workforce. And so they created a program and then brought a few hundred people back to workforce. And so there are very many specific interventions people can do. And like we said, the founders are very innovative, their teams are very innovative. So we're constantly asking them so that we can spread that word to other people, and other people can follow that and make sure they can get to a significantly higher parity over time.
Yeah, and I love this sharing here on different startups and what they do. I mean, in the US, I was speaking to Sapphire Partners that invested into Gusto a long while back, and Gusto, the payroll company that has become so much more than that. And they actually talk about culture, right? And how they interview not for culture fit, but culture enhancement, and that actually builds into the diversity, as you said. GV, it's not just about having women in the room, but it's making sure that they are heard, they have that opportunity to influence the conversation. And I think that goes the same way. So I want to turn to Sunitha to really ask, what are you seeing, from a culture standpoint? How are your portfolio companies approaching this? And also perhaps, culture within your own firm that is very female heavy, which is an anomaly for the industry, unfortunately, still today.
Yeah, especially in this industry, right? I think
right.
If you just look at the investment landscape itself, there are a handful of funds who even have women, even associates, forget about partners, right? I think from that aspect, we are definitely a lot more women heavy across the spectrum, not just senior management as well, founder, like I said, senior management, as well as at different roles as well, and kind of just gives a semblance of balance in the overall organization, right? And interestingly, for all the founders who actually also raise funds through us, they do see that at different levels where, whether I interact or my team interacts, they do see that thing happening. So when they go ahead and actually look at hiring as well, they come back and say, hey, what can we look at diversified team hiring? How can we actually support on hiring women as well? How can LetsVenture support on that front too, right? So I think it's also seeing, and then kind of going ahead from there on to be able to build their own teams. And I think, from a culture aspect, it is important to have that diversity. And I think overall, what women bring from an organization perspective, right? Being organized, like you said, also more from a cash flow management, money management. I think all of those actually make a difference at an overall level from a company aspect. Just to kind of add to what both Cheetah as well as GV mentioned, I think it's also about when you're going out, you need to maybe make that extra effort, not in terms of having a screening mechanism, but more in terms of saying, hey, I'm going to be unbiased, right? I think the moment that is out there, it's a lot more easier for women to actually apply and be part of your organization or a community as well, right? They know that there is going to be no bias is actually the first step. As long as people are aware of it, a lot more easier actually to approach this problem.
Yeah, and are you seeing anything creative in terms of being active on that? And I'll throw one out here. One of our partner funds based in Canada. So we're a global consortium of over 100 venture funds and LP investors. One of them, Loyal VC, led by two men, decided to remove the pitch process completely, only base their decision on data and milestones, and they tranche out their investment. And with that, they have now 33%, I think approaching 40%, not just female founders, but female CEOs. So that's interesting. That's something that is not necessarily the norm. Are you seeing anything interesting in Asia, that folks who are tuning in can pick up as inspiration as well?
Surprisingly, not as much. I don't think we've seen any innovative criteria from a women founder aspect, but I think what we have seen is a lot more women focused or diversified funds actually coming up, right? Where they are saying, can we actually support a lot more women, very specific funds which are coming up, and for people who've actually been in PE, setting up VCs, or a lot more women actually setting up VC funds as well. I think that is the first step, at least in India, which we are seeing as a good change, pleasant change that we're seeing.
Yeah, and Cheetah, how about you? Are you observing anything in the industry that's interesting to you? I mean, both from founder, VC, LP standpoint.
Yeah, I guess same observations with Sunitha. I haven't really seen any initiatives, I guess, other than Sequoia Spark, which I've heard about immediately after it was launched. What other than female focused funds?
Got it. Okay, and GV, anything to add there? Anything else? I mean,
well, I think so. It's early days. The awareness is improving, and as there are some examples set. Hopefully, Spark is a successful program, and we can show how even small amounts of money can make a big difference in kind of encouraging the ecosystem to really come forward. And I'm pretty sure others will follow. Right? It's a matter of time, and everybody knows the importance of this. And we should see more people participate in this. And from our perspective, Spark is not a Sequoia only thing. I mean, we don't want to think about it like that. It's for the ecosystem. We really encourage all other funds to come together. We are committing 100K, and this is not from the funds. It's really the GPs taking it as something that is important enough to commit capital, personal capital to this. So as that is coming through, we are hoping other people, and this is done as grants. This is not for equity. This is not for returns. It's really to say, hey, let's just find ways to encourage more women to come, and kind of start companies, build companies. And so, we are hoping we'll participate with many other VCs who will come together like this. And it doesn't have to be done as grant, whatever, but there is good economics in this. People should be aware that you can make real returns backing women founders. And hopefully, there'll be many more such examples. And, I think it's a matter of time when all of this finds a lot more momentum.
Yeah. And GV, how are you? Sorry, go ahead.
I can just add that I think to what GV also mentioned, I think it's also about seeing a lot more women becoming much more successful, right? So in India, we have Nykaa, while there are multiple founders, there's just one person's name which is coming in all the time. And the moment you see a woman founder becoming a lot more successful, I think it's just a trickle down effect, right? I think across the spectrum, you will see a lot more people supporting both women founders as well as, women founders coming forward to actually build bigger businesses.
Yeah, and I was just gonna ask GV as well. I love the fact that GPs are putting in personal money, and this is a grant. But of course, the elephant in the room, right? And sort of the big issue is that women have always been in the early stages, and sure, we need to get them there and build them, in a robust manner. But what is Sequoia? How is Sequoia thinking about bridging then the gap, from getting them successful to the seed stage and actually becoming, scalable, Series A, Series B, Series C? I mean, I just heard from a friend of mine that recently, only today, TechCrunch announced that in Pakistan, they've never had a female founder that has hit Series A, and that's scary to think, right? Like over this years, but they are having a moment. Pakistan is having a moment now with a lot of funding coming through. But how are we thinking about bridging the gap to make sure that we're not just doing grants, right? 100K is great, but as you know, to get to the $1 billion business, it's going to take a lot more than that. How do we ensure this?
I'm slightly an optimist on this. To me, I think if we fix the mouth of the funnel, top of the funnel problem, and we provide access, I think the outcomes will happen automatically. Let us not underestimate, what is possible. I don't think I don't think we should make this the case that, look, they need more support because something, it's just give them access, give them a level playing field, and let's see the outcomes. I'm pretty confident the outcomes will be actually spectacular for us to see. And honestly, Spark is, like I said, encouraging women to start in its mouth of the funnel. But a lot of the Sequoia programs are not designed for men or for women separately. There are lots of company building type programs that we've got. We've got Surge, which is a 4-month program. Again, very high representation of women relative to market in that program. Then we have a program called Build, where we again helping companies, working with one of the partners, X10X, to really say, how do you create an operating framework and a model for companies to scale? And all of this should be available to everybody, both women and men founders. And to me, once you solve the access problem, everything else will fall in place. I actually think just make the playing field a little bit more level, and you will see the magic.
Chita, do you agree? As a founder yourself, do you think that's enough?
Yeah, okay. I personally don't think the issue is actually on the funding side. I think it's more what I mentioned earlier, which is around role modeling, and I guess I'm experiencing this myself personally, which is what GV earlier mentioned, like how do we support women who for example, just had a baby or are trying to get out of the workforce and then come back, and so making the workplace and I guess the companies more friendly towards possible diversity in terms of way of working, right? I think COVID will help with that a lot. So I myself, as a beneficiary, from the situation. I've been able to be with my newborn for a much longer time, and that has helped me a lot. I think I'm more productive now than before, and I can't imagine being a mom without the COVID situation. So hopefully that'll, I guess, even things out. But I guess to the point around funding, I think the Spark programs like Spark really emphasizes like, hey, we really care about female founders, and this is our way of showing it. But I don't think it's necessarily, hey, females need more money, and so we're gonna set that aside for them. So it's more of like giving people, a sense of, okay, we should actually think about that as well, right? And then kind of have the trickle down effect happen. So yeah, my 2 cents.
Yeah, love it. Well, Chita, you brought in a good segue, which is something that I did want to touch upon. How has COVID? I know COVID has benefited you as a new mommy. Congratulations on that. And really important. It's really I spoke to actually Brian Elliott from Slack, who's all about the future of work, and it's really opened up a lot of new avenues for diversity, because a lot of you can go through different states and hire a little bit more openly. So there's to the point of talent is universal, opportunities, not remote working has opened up that opportunity. But of course there are additional burdens where women have been hit disproportionately across the world, right? Women have been leaving the workforce in droves, starting in the United States, and I'm sure across your countries yourself. Curious to hear, how has COVID changed your perspective, if at all? How are you approaching things differently? And if we can do this as a question for all around the table, starting with Sunitha.
I think both pros and cons, right? In some ways it's not affected at all. In some ways, yes. I think, like you said, a lot of women, I think, are not getting in there is also because of the family, right? I think single women have not had problem, or people without kids have not had a problem. I think the bigger problem was because the kids are not going to school. How are you going to spend time, right? So that's where I think the balance of work and home front actually started becoming a problem, because of which a lot of people are taking a step back. But I think if that's solved is where we will be able to see things come back to normal. I don't think it's a woman issue. It's also the child issue, I think, which everybody is facing across the world. I see that as a problem, actually.
How about in terms of the way you're working, or the way that you're viewing, I guess now it's sort of you're coming out of this crisis or a black swan event in some way. How has that influenced your thinking?
Again, I think there are some things which have not changed at all, right? Because be it pre or post COVID, I think there are some things across from a funding aspect which will remain the same. Those things won't go away. But I think a lot more things about how founders have actually gotten through that crisis, right? What was their learning through this crisis is also very, very important, right? There are very few people who actually made it through COVID. There are a lot of companies who have not made it through COVID because they were not able to align towards what is happening in the world, not agile enough to actually change course and actually build on things. I think that aspect from a founder perspective actually has changed. So you'll see a lot more resilient founders who have stayed through this COVID and actually become bigger. That aspect is what you will actually see from a founder aspect, because tomorrow we don't know if there's another disaster waiting to happen. Are they actually ready from a mindset perspective to be able to adopt to those circumstances and then go ahead from there on?
GV, how about you?
Yeah, look, I think COVID has obviously made a significant kind of impact on how people work, and we've seen both actually men and women somewhat struggle, making that adjustment, because you're not used to having a kid all the time around you and having to deal with the child and its needs. And I want to go back. There was a time when in India we were locked down, and so it was just me and my wife and my son, and no help because things are shut down. And you realize how much we need to feed ourselves, for example, right? Like 4 times a day, 3 times a day. And like, there's so much work around that for the first time you're realizing, because, when you're on the move, you're not really realizing somebody else is doing the work. But, when it comes back to yourselves, I think there's an appreciation for what the contributions are, and, how it has to be more equal than before, at least until we could get back some support and help within. So maybe more men have seen, how women are managing both work and home, and have developed sense of high responsibility. I hope that has happened. But going back, I think to Sunitha's point, the bigger message is, look, coming through something like COVID. How do we use this as an opportunity versus seeing it as a crisis? In a way, you've seen that today you can actually have the flexibility to kind of work from anywhere, work at times that suit each person better. For example, at Sequoia, we're still not yet open our offices, and that's given flexibility for people to kind of work from anywhere they want, take a break, go somewhere, still be able to, be at work in a way in the times that can work for you. And we've all kind of figured out protocols saying, how do you make sure work and life is not looking like one piece, because some early in COVID boundaries went away and it felt like you're working all the time. Now we've all found our own rhythm. We've got respect for the weekends back, times and so on. So figured out how to manage calendars. I think look, human beings will always evolve, and we will always thrive. We'll find ways, and I think I'm optimistic that there will be more things we take out of COVID for the positive in terms of how to leverage global talent, how to bring more women back into work. I'm very, very kind of curious to see how we will make that happen, because it's important.
Absolutely. And now, turning to the tactical towards the end of this conversation, what can we do? What are the tactical steps for funders, founders, leaders that are tuning in our industry? And I do want to start with Sunitha. We didn't touch upon this, but from an angel investment standpoint, I know you're seeing more women coming to the fold, but not enough. Talk to us a little bit about that. Talk to us about, how we can change this. And I know cultural stereotypes does play quite a heavy role. So starting with you, and then, wrapping up with the rest in terms of tactical strategies for founders and funders tuning in.
Yeah, like I earlier mentioned, I think for us, one of the things which actually stood out with the number of angel investors who were there on the platform who were women, right? 10 out of 8,000 was an abysmal number. So we said, how do we actually change this? And we started a program called WIN, which is Women Investor Group, which we ran cohorts and ran them through, how do you think about certain things? It's not about educating, but it's more about giving them this basic know-how and also the engagement. Right. So guys, actually been a supporter of ours on this program as well, where, it's about that discussion. I think it was, I can read up everything online, but what can I actually learn from other people who actually been there and done those things, right? I think that changed for us. So the first cohort actually had 30 odd women, out of which 20 have already transacted. I think that was for us a big tick to say, what, women started actually investing, writing their first check. We had to make things a little more easier to say, hey, start with smaller checks. But one of the most important things which actually played out was the community, right? I write my first check. I'm coming onto the group and saying, hey, what, Sarah, I wrote my first check. So you also get interested in it and say, okay, why don't I take that first step, right? So it's important for that community to actually get built where they don't feel anything is stupid, right? There is no stupid question. I think that is very important, both from actually the founder and the funder perspective. I think that's more important, right? Where I'm not going to be judged by any question that I ask and I'll get the answer, right? I think that will change how people are actually about to go about with things, gain that knowledge to actually move on to the next phase. And again, like, GV mentioned, it's irrespective, we think women founders need more support. Actually, the men need as much support, right? It's just that nobody actually calls it out. The men actually have a larger community because of which they get that connect, right? I think that is what is missing. Can the women get support of the other women as well as the other men? How does it matter? And as long as I'm getting that mentor and support in terms of being able to build my business. I think that community building is going to be one of the most key things for the next few years for us to be able to build all of these ecosystems and actually gain much larger traction on that front.
Yeah, so I absolutely love this, women as investors. And I do see a question coming in here, which speaks to a little bit of the cultural stereotype on women as investors in Asia, and actually, whether they do have full control over their finances to make these decisions. Are you seeing any nuances in that way where?
Very interesting question, right? So before we launched this, we actually spoke to multiple founders as well as multiple people who are in the CXO positions of companies to see, does it even make sense for us to launch this? And what kind of program should we actually launch? Women founders, Series A, B founders, while their counterparts actually were investing in multiple companies. The founders were not too sure. Hey, you know what? I'm not too sure if I should start investing. I don't earn as much, which is another point which they actually brought about. Lot more risk averse, right? They were not comfortable in terms of actually putting a check out because they didn't know how much they might end up making, say, in a few years' time, and do I have enough actually corpus which I can play around in terms of making investments, right? And on the other hand, even from a few of the CXOs, hey, my husband manages my finances, I need to ask him and come back, was actually a very, very surprising point for us, because we said, you are in a very, very senior position. How does it matter? A lot of women actually do not manage their own finances, right? And I think that is starting to change, but there is a large block of people who are actually there, right? And I think it's important for them to take that first step and say, hey, can I start making my own investments? I'll be really small starting off. And then when you get confidence, actually start making larger leaps there.
Yeah, I love that. And you know, I will share that it's not only an Asian problem in the US. I mean, this is a pretty dated statistic, but you know, there's going to be a huge transfer of wealth to, you know, from the baby boomers to the millennials, and then also wives that are inheriting from their husbands because women have a longer lifespan. But I heard from some of my banker friends that only 20% of women attend their financial advisor meetings with their husbands, 20% in the US. What does that mean, right? That impacts who gets funded, what gets funded, how do we control our finances, and things that you talk about here, women as investors. So really, really appreciate the lens there, and really think that it's important what you're doing of showing, you know, that again, to Chita's point of role modeling, that you can be successful, and that this is a one that everyone should be part of. And before Chita, I turn to you, I did want to ask GV to also give us tactical steps, you know, what can we do? How can we move forward here?
Yeah, Sarah, so we discussed a lot about this, but I think at least for me, it comes down to the input metrics. Let's start fixing the inputs. Let's ask the toughest questions. Are people trying hard enough? You know, for example, one of the companies I spoke to saying, how do you guys deal with it? And they said, look, we make sure the input funnel is at least 50-50. Like we should be meeting 50% of the candidates we meet for recruiting have to be women. That's the mandate. Now, you can't mandate saying hire 30% and then people will say, hey, you know, my bar is this and quality and so on. So leave all that out. At least make sure on the input metrics you're doing really well, right? And so to me, it's really that let's start with the inputs and keep making progress. And you know, some places we'll have to overcompensate. You know, we'll have to do extra work. If you know people need extra help, we should provide that. But honestly, I think if the input metrics are fixed, hopefully slowly, but definitely this will change in the right direction.
Yeah, and just to be a bit more specific there, GV, from a partner track standpoint, are you thinking hiring from the outside, or you know, to address these input metrics?
Yeah, all whatever is necessary, Sarah, to improve the balance. So we're looking at all levels, and of course, you know, it's easier to do it at associate levels onwards, so that you know people are kind of coming up and learning. But we are constantly looking.
Yeah, that's good to hear, because I mean, hopefully it's not going to take a full generation, right, from associates all the way to partner, because we need the change now. And I think you all have said that. And Chita, ending with you, take us home here. What can we do to be better for you, for founders like you who are in the rough of things?
Oh, that's a lot of pressure.
No pressure.
No, I think, I mean, one of the interesting examples brought up earlier was just eliminating the process of pitching. I think going through like a couple of fundraising rounds now, I do think that makes a difference. We have had kind of pitches back to back with a couple of our competitors who are male dominated from a founder perspective. And, you know, just to be honest, the feedback that we've gotten from those pitches have always been, hey, you guys are not aggressive enough. What do you mean? Yeah, your numbers don't add up and they don't seem as big as, you know, the others. But then when we looked at their pitch decks, we're pretty aggressive. You know, fundamentally, it's just like they don't get that vibe from us. And maybe it's the risk averseness, or maybe it's you know, personality wise, the three of us aren't like, you know, big voices or anything like that. But I think that makes a lot of difference in terms of making sure the biases are better managed upfront, and I guess to GV's point, helping the inputs be better filtered.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, I think a lot for us to think about in reframing, making sure our pattern matching don't actually mask as unconscious bias, right? To your point there. And I think we've all talked at length, but thank you so much, everyone, for fantastic inputs talking about GV's inputs there and making sure that we are all being conscientious in building a future that is inclusive and innovative. And I'm an optimist like all of you. I think we have to be optimists in this business. Thank you so much for tuning in, and be sure to follow Deal Street Asia on the next couple of days. Thanks, Joji and team.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks, Deal Street team.
And we're